Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Today we have a great topic. We're going to be talking about zero trust, and we are going to be navigating uncharted waters with confidence. So we're excited that you could join us today. This is going to be a great event. Before we get started, I have some general housekeeping items we're going to talk about. So number one, this webinar is being recorded. So the full replay will be available on our YouTube page. And the other important thing is we are going to be doing some Q&A. So use the chat for that. There's a Q&A function, so make sure you do that. If you are registered with us, you will get an email automatically when the recording is ready to go. So let me tell you just a little bit about Trusted Sec. If you're not familiar with us, we approach the business of security a little bit differently than others. We have industry leaders who work hands-on. We have a dynamic, collaborative, cross-team intelligence that drive better results for our customers. And we have unique security challenges require unique approaches. We definitely believe in that, and we are here to help you with that. We have an extensive area that does research and innovation. And finally, we definitely do a lot of things with empathy and honesty. And we understand that it's tough, so there's no reason to make it even tougher. A Trusted Sec helps out in a lot of different ways. The ways we can do it is quite comprehensive. We can help from the design angle, helping you design security programs. We can definitely help you evaluate where you are today with pen testing, social engineering testing, purple, red team, cloud pen testing, all sorts of great stuff. And we can also help you harden your environment. So after you've had some of those events or a real event, we can help you harden your environment. And finally, but last but not least, we have a team that can respond in the case that you do have a breach. We have a team standing by that is there to help you. Today, I am pleased to introduce Jamie Alberts to you about Zero Trust. So Jamie, welcome to the webinar, and we're excited to have you here.
Thanks, Paul.
So we have one poll question coming up, and with that, I'll turn it over. So the first question is, how far along are you in the Zero Trust journey? So if you want to fill that in, we'll refer to that as soon as we can. So there we go. Over to you, Jamie.
Sure. Thanks, Paul, for the intro. One thing that I kind of want to call out, some of the unsung heroes of Trusted Sec that are really in that. So the marketing team, we're all technical people, but the marketing team and our back office support teams do a great job supporting us as well. They don't get enough praise. Is they make things look pretty when we might have the technical knowledge. We're not so great at possibly typing or speaking. So again, thanks to them. So if you guys go through, we're gonna have, I think, 4 poll questions coming up through this. Please answer them. Great. Yeah, I wanted to kind of see where we're at here. So, oh wow, all right, we got somebody with fully deployed. Great, that's good to see there. So we're kind of a little mix here. We've got the haven't started, planning and designing. That's good to see. Okay, so yeah, we got a good mix. This is really going to be focused on the NIST framework side of things, and we'll kind of go through that. And we want to give kind of really a base level to sort of kind of really talk about what Zero Trust really is out there, because there's a lot of confusion around it and what it may be and what it really means to companies. So one other thing you'll notice here as well, we've got kind of a nautical theme to this. So one of the inside jokes I'll let you in on at Trusted Sec is that I am a boat aficionado. So if you do see me out and about or an event, feel free to come up and say, "You have a boat?" So you can play it along with one of the jokes. So what is Zero Trust? So one of the greatest quotes of all time is, for an avid boater, you're going to need a bigger boat. So let me go ahead and click forward here. So the name itself, it really kind of came around with the introduction of the frameworks around 2010. And those have since evolved, of course, but it's sort of a interesting name. So even though it implies that there is no trust, as in the word zero, it really means that there's no implicit or inherent trust. So what that really talks about is in the old days of really securing a network, you had your firewalls at the edge, and anything that sat on the internal side of the firewall could talk to everything on the internal side of the firewall. So it's like, okay, this is our stuff. It's allowed to talk to that stuff. We trust it. Well, with, you know, bad actors really gaining a lot of footholds in with different vulnerabilities, you want to really limit the lateral movement between your environment. So a lot of that became with microsegmentation, and all of those things have started to really kind of grow. And then zero trust is just kind of enhancing that a little bit. So kind of speaking on that, a lot of the foundational concepts that or the components of a zero trust architecture, it's really technology and processes that are best practices today. So microsegmentation, DLP, CASB, things like that that are really touching on and monitoring your systems, providing a lot of data, but it's adding a level of automation and orchestration on top of it. So it's not you go in and configure a system where, you know, only these few ports are open, so you're restricting access, which, you know, is good, it works, but those ports are always open. Where with the automation parts added on top of zero trust, those ports are only going to be open on a per session basis, and they're also going to be consistently reviewed and checked. So even if somebody is permitted to access a certain system, it's going to be consistently reviewed, not just based on who the user is, what their system is. It's going to be collecting data from all different types of sources, from like your EDR, it could be your IPS, IDS, your DLP, and making a decision whether to either start restricting access based on things that it sees, or completely disconnecting a person based on information it receives as well. So even though we're focusing on NIST here, I don't want to leave out the other frameworks that are out there. So they're kind of a few, the main ones that are really out there. You're going to see Forrester. They're really the one that came out in 2010 that's kind of evolved. Gartner and NIST. So when you look at them, they are very similar in their structure. However, there's different nuances, different terms. Just kind of when you look at sort of their framework documentation, it's actually very similar, but little nuances and difference. But the big thing to see with this is zero trust isn't a check this box, check that box type of deployment model. It's something that is very customized, excuse me, very customized to each company and their specific requirements and environments. So obviously newer companies might be fully cloud hosted within Azure or AWS. You'll have a lot of legacy companies that might still have some mainframe stuff floating around. So you really have to take zero trust and say, okay, this is something we're looking to deploy, but then you kind of have to look inside and say, how does this really fit? And you might end up sort of making a decision that you're only going to do certain critical data environments. So you might not even do full zero trust across the board. It might be remote access. It might be to an ERP, certain things like that. So it is not an all or nothing approach. It is something that you can kind of piecemeal. And when you are actually doing the deployment of zero trust, that's really how it's going to kind of happen. You're going to stand up the baseline framework, and then you're going to slowly roll in different environments, different applications. And the deployment as well as technology used might be different for all of those. Try click forward. So what zero trust isn't. Oh, another poll question here if you guys take a look. So what do you guys think the biggest challenge in adopting the zero trust model? I'll be interested to see what you guys have for that, because I think all of these are very fair answers to be chosen.
Yeah. There's a lot of complexity, new terms, new which department's responsible for it, right? There's all sorts of complexities that we have here.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely from a technology perspective, it can be a challenge. And really one of the hardest things that I've seen is kind of going through and reviewing the different technologies and solutions that are out there, is there's not a lot of concrete data. And so yeah, top one there, integrating with existing infrastructure. So yeah, so there's a lot of technical debt out there. Unless you're a brand new company, like I said, that is spun up, that you're entirely cloud, you're going to have to figure out a way of, how do I manage and support an environment like a mainframe, or any systems that can't support an API tying into the zero trust gateway. So what zero trust isn't, so just getting into this, it is not something you're just going to go buy off the shelf. A lot of executives would love to see that it's just a line item in the budget, show up, boom, guess what? Hey, it's Monday, we bought it. Wednesday, yeah, we're zero trust, good to go. Not going to happen. Having a network background, I like to sort of equate this as the theory of NAC. So network access control. It sounds so simple to do, but there is the actual process of deploying from a technical perspective and turning on network access control is super easy. The problem is, if you do that in 3 days, you broke everything. So there's so much legwork that you have to do before you actually get to the point of deployment. That is why it is specifically a shift in mindset, because there are so many best practices that you have to go through, process documentation, and knowledge that you have to gain before you're actually ready to even buy and flip the switch on the technology. So I spoke to this a little bit earlier, zero trust or bust. While from a high level perspective, you'd love to do something across the board, you might determine that the level of effort that it is for certain environments to actually integrate into zero trust might not get you the reward in the end. It might not be worth it. The costs and everything might not be there. So you might decide that you are only going to deploy this for certain resources and access to certain resources. Speaking on that still, so zero trust products, they might not support all your technology stacks. So this goes back to the level of technical debt that you have for years. Whether good or bad, every organization that I go to and speak with, there is a lot of technical debt that is out there. And a lot of it derives from just businesses being businesses, needing data, keeping data. So that's really where that comes from. So will it be supported on a mainframe? Because most of the solutions you see today are really agent-based solutions being deployed to servers, computers, things like that, with their orchestration model either in the cloud or hosted on-prem. Well, you're not going to be able to put an agent on an IBM mainframe. So that's where you're going to have to look at what deployment model do we use and how does that change? And we'll talk about deployment models here in just a little bit. So what is the NIST? And this is specifically NIST, Zero Trust Architecture. So I've added some quotes here that I spoke to earlier. So I like this one. For certain, you have to be lost to find a place that can't be found. So that's kind of, a lot of these started in jest of just trying to find some good nautical quotes. And as I went along, I'm like, wow, a lot of these really apply to IT. So it worked out in my favor. So what is the NIST Zero Trust Architecture? So this is a definition straight from the NIST framework, which is a decent read. It'll give you a lot of the same information you're going to get here. It is the NIST 800-207 publication that you'll want to look up there. So as defined by NIST, zero trust is a collection of concepts and ideas designed to minimize uncertainty in enforcing accurate, least privileged, per request access decisions in information systems and services in the face of a network viewed as compromised. So the big part here that sort of is an interesting concept is the last 4 words there: network viewed as compromised. So the big part of zero trust is you really want to treat all of your connectivity, all of your data and everything is that, again, there is a bad actor on your environment that you are trying to restrict as much access to that data and protect it as much as possible. So the NIST zero trust architecture. So there's a few things here too as well. So you'll see NIST refers to their 7 tenets. Forrester as well as Gartner, they'll talk about the different pillars that they have of their framework. So like I said, there's a lot of different terms that'll be used between, but they're all fairly similar. So what is the tenet? Basically, it's the ideal deployment. But what we kind of spoke about before, they might not be fully implemented based on your strategy or your requirements in your environment. So this is really these are the things you should be doing, but there's always a way to kind of get around this. So that is one thing that's very good to look at or take in there. So the first zero trust tenet here. So all data sources and computing services are considered resources. So a resource, you'll hear that referred to when you go through your NIST zero trust and really any zero trust journey. It's the different type of just really kind of calling that together of what those things is. So you'll have subjects, which is usually considered users. So subjects are usually users as well as PCs or any external device. Resources are really going to be things such as servers, databases, applications. So you'll see that referred there. All communication is secured regardless of network location. So this is talking about encrypted conversations on your network, the different connections that you have, but this is all not only going to be external connectivity, this is also going to be internal connectivity. So the way you'll hear a lot of talk within zero trust around how you can now eliminate like VPN. I think the issue with that terminology, I think, is it sort of just, sounds mind-boggling, but really what it's talking about is you're allowing access because your devices that are external are always monitored. And think of it as sort of agentless not agentless VPN, but term escapes me now. But where you're actually able to access it regardless of logging in. Like you're always authenticated. You're always being validated against what you're allowed to have access to up within the zero trust framework. Access to individual enterprise resources is granted on a per session basis. So think of this as an application you're wishing to access that is internal to your environment as a company related resource. Every time you go to connect to that, you're going to be authenticated and authorized access to that. While that session is also occurring, it is going to be continuously reviewing the connectivity that you have. So even if you connect and then all of a sudden there's a change made on the back end to your user access or something relative to your PC, something comes in and happens, it's going to terminate that connectivity based on the policies that you built up into your zero trust architecture. Sorry, my little forward button kind of disappears every now and then. So again, talking about the dynamic policy. So access to resources is determined by dynamic policy, including the observable state of client identity, application and service, and the requesting asset. It may include other behavioral environmental attributes. So this is just kind of going off what I just stated. So it's constantly reviewing it. The access is when it goes to the policy administrator, and we'll talk some components here in terms of zero trust in just a couple slides. But so it'll talk to basically your orchestrator within zero trust, and it's going to go through and validate all the criteria that you have set up within your policy. Now, the one thing to realize here is that traditionally, when let's say you have a service or a web page or something that is open, you're going into your firewall and you're basically opening that port. So port 443 is open to this server. The way that it changes within zero trust, so any that port is not open all the time unless it's specific for something externally hosted for non-zero trust access. But for internal users, those ports through the firewall are basically locked down at all times until that request is granted. So not only is it just that you're going and the dynamic policy is reading through it and saying, yeah, you're allowed, where it's authorizing a user, it's also dynamically telling the PEP that sits right in front of the resource to allow and open these service ports. So that way, that's where it's dynamic all the way through. It's not just a dynamic authentication of the subject. It's actually a dynamic authentication of the subject, as well as a configuration of the resource to allow the connection, which is then opening the actual service port that it's on. The enterprise monitors and measures the integrity and security posture of all owned and associated assets. So one thing that you'll actually see, we'll talk here in a little bit about deployment models, that there are some gotchas in some of the deployment models around how do you perform and scan the security posture of these assets that you have. So a lot of this being agent-based, it'll be there. It can go in and, it'll be doing kind of system scans, a lot like your EDR does today. This will really be doing a inventory of what you have. It'll be monitoring processes, pulling data. And then that's really when it goes to connect to a server or a resource. When it goes to connect to a resource, it'll actually talk to the policy administrator or the gateway. We'll talk to the policy administrator and basically provide that information. And this will also be data that is provided all the way up to the policy administrator or the PDP, which is a combination of a couple of things. But it'll go to the PDP and it can be ingested to basically then make informed decisions that if there is an issue of restricting certain access across the entire organization because it sees that maybe a subject like a PC is trying to connect outwardly to malicious websites or malware-based sites. All resource authentication and authorization are dynamic and strictly enforced before access is allowed. So again, this is going through dynamically looking up, what are you who you say you are, and are you permitted to have access to what you want access to? And this is where that enforcement of the actual port and giving access to that port. So this is really just the lockdown of those systems. So this also talks about kind of the enterprise monitors assets. This is really talking about everything, resources, as well as the network and the communications on the network. So the enterprise needs to collect as much information as possible. And the reason for collecting all this information is that is leveraged within the zero trust architecture to make those decisions on what can have access and what shouldn't have access. Okay. Zero trust components. So I mentioned earlier the PDP, so the policy decision point. So this is really made up of two components. So the policy engine, and that is the decision maker of granting access to resources. So the engine is what's really taking all the data, looking at everything that's coming in, the different integrations with the identity store, things like that, and deciding, are you permitted to have access? Is that subject allowed to have access? The policy administrator is what's actually working with the PEP, which we go ahead and click one more. Works with the PEP and is really kind of communicating, telling the PEP what to permit or deny access to. So what I want to point out is, even though we only listed basically 2 components here, these are kind of the brains of the operation and are very generic terms as to what it really kind of covers. There's all the different pieces that really sit outside that feed this. So like I talked about before, your DLP, your IPS IDS, your EDR, those are all things that will feed information into this. And that's where a lot of the trickiness kind of comes in. Because if you're like a split environment where you're not an all Cisco shop, top to bottom, everything, that can create issues where you're trying, how do you take the integration of this? Does it play well with this provider's solution, zero trust solution? So that's where a lot of that stuff kind of comes in. So these are really the high level sort of generic points that you'll see of just the PDP and PEP. But a lot of your really discovery that you're going to have is with where all that information level gathering comes from and gets ingested, and how does that kind of integrate. And just for reference, depending on your deployment, you will have multiple PEPs. So a lot of times what you'll see, depending on your deployment model, which we'll talk about here on the next slide, you will see that your deployment model will really drive. So there's some where you have very specific resources. So we talked a little bit about kind of like micro-segmentation before. So it's very familiar to that, where you'll have a PEP in front of each different resource group. But then there's also where it's the agent based, where it's almost every resource has an agent deployed to it. And you can think of those as being the PEPs for that. Nope. Zero trust deployment model. So this is what I was kind of getting to. So device agent gateway model. So this is really the PEPs in 2 components here as well. So you're going to have the subject side, the resource side. So each enterprise issued asset has an installed agent that basically it's coordinating the connections. In each resource, there's a component that's sitting in front that the resource connects to. So think of that as like a proxy for the resource. So if you have, whatever it be, net scalers or things like that, it's similar in thought to that. If I try to equate things to things we're all used to from the last 10 years, where it's very similar, just to kind of get through, because it helps myself think of it this way. So it's really a proxy that sits in front, and the resource talks to the proxy, or I'm sorry, I don't want to say the proxy, the gateway, and then the gateway will then talk up to the PDP. So the policy administrator, policy engine. So what happens is the agent on the subject's actually going to request access from that from the PEP, and then that PEP will then talk up and then basically come down and permit or deny access based on what comes out of the policy engine or policy administrator. Next, so what we have seen typically in our zero trust deployments is you're really going to have a mixture of these first 2. Agent-based everything, and I think you can kind of talk a little bit about this, Paul. Everything's agent-based now. And
There are definitely a lot of agents all over the place, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're running with your EDR, you've got even some of your DLP things are now being pushed out to your different hosts with an agent. So like, it's funny, anytime you go out and look at any product now, it's always like, just deploy this agent on top of the 450 agents that you already have on your computer. And so that's really kind of the mix we're seeing, is a device agent gateway model with the mixture of the enclave-based deployment. So the enclave-based deployment is what I talked about just last slide, where it's really, you're going to have defined resource groups. So it's going to be a single group or an application per business function. So it'll be, let's say it's just your ERP and the database that supports it. So you would have that ecosystem behind its own PEP, and then you'd break that up. So you'd have very large micro segmentation throughout your data center. So one way to kind of think of this is really micro segmentation behind a firewall with different firewall zones. But you're going to break that down on a per application or business case level, rather than all your database servers, or however it may be broken down today. It's going to be application or ecosystem based, where it's going to be all of that is, and within that there is some trust there that they are allowed to talk to each other, but you're not going to have the access in where they can talk to everything else. So the excuse me, the resource-based, portal-based deployment. So this is really kind of, it's a little bit of both. So think of it, it's very close to the enclave-based side. So it can be a single resource or kind of a resource enclave, but the issue with this one is there is only scanning on connectivity. So this kind of, in a way, I question why this is a deployment model, because you're not doing continuous scanning and monitoring of assets. You're only seeing that on connectivity today. So in a way, this is sort of like when you're posturing a device that is trying to come through VPN, where you're scanning, do you have this AV, do you have this, do you have this, do you have this? So you're only doing it when they're trying to connect, which can still be effective at protecting your resources and your data. But it's not a continuous thing that is happening over and over. So I think you lose a lot of visibility and a lot of the information and data that you would actually be ingesting on the upper side of zero trust. And the last one. So this one is very similar to some other products that are out there today that are really talking about like application sandboxing. You'll see it with certain privilege management products that they have out there. So this one's kind of interesting, but the issue with this is really, I mean, for people that don't know, so you're running your application, they call it sandboxing. So you're basically locking this down, and you're allowing a subject in to connect, but you are not allowing the application to speak or talk to any other applications or resources that are there. And they'll talk to the PEP. So everything has to go through the PEP and gateway and be approved on both sides. But this requires a lot of heavy lifting on the application side to really keep these things working and up to date as you're doing updates. You got to make sure a lot of the sandboxing still works. It can just create some issues and add a lot of overhead, just a lot of overhead in your day-to-day management, which a lot of people, today don't have the resources to do so. It also can provide, just like the one before, the resource portal based, it can also provide a lack of visibility into the different subjects connecting in. All right, another poll. In your opinion, what is the most important benefit of implementing a zero trust architecture? So if you guys want to go ahead and take a shot at that. We can step forward here. So another quote that I ended up kind of liking, Long John Silver. You got the makings of greatness in you, but you got to take the helm and chart your own course. So this is oh, okay. Looks like we're having a little video issues on our side. I thought they were telling me, but it's related to Paul, so that's no problem. All right, so the answer here. So, yep, better protection against data breaches. Yes, improved visibility, control over access, sensitive data. Leading the charge. Okay. All right. Yeah, so really, I think this quote kind of fits this because it's what I've seen, and you'll see it in a lot of reading if you do on zero trust, is that, you know, the biggest thing to do is there's really no end to zero trust, and it's like cybersecurity in general. Like, you never hit the wall and go, we're done, no more, we're good forever. You know, it is constantly evolving, and they talk about it being a journey. So that's the biggest thing, is zero trust is a journey. You're not just going to finally get there. You might end up being there, but you're going to have to keep sailing and find your next adventure within it. All right. There we go. So again, although they may be sold as a drop-in solution, you really, really have to look at a lot of your base level processes and even documentation. So you're going to have to understand, to build these things out, what exactly is that resource doing for your business, for your end users, and how do they access it? So you're going to have to really look up a lot of, you know, traffic flows, what ports specifically need open. And again, this is best practice documentation, but documentation always falls by the wayside because it doesn't pay the bills, which is understandable. But in the times of crisis, like a cybersecurity event or a disaster recovery event, any of those things, documentation is key. So really building those things out, that is where the time's going to be. There's going to be all this legwork to get up to where you're ready to deploy zero trust. And that's really what we're talking about here, is that you're going to have to understand your environment, how people access things, how applications are providing data, because there can be two things that happen. One, you'll go to deploy zero trust, you'll think it's in, and then you might be missing something and there's a breach. Two, you could break everything and the bosses don't like that. So little job security in there. So network system and application access requirements must be fully understood. Again, this is going to be workflows, just documentation, your systems, your access, anything like that. How accounts are created. Is it, you know, do you have automated account provisioning within your IAM processes? Organization must have well-defined policies and processes. Same thing. So a lot of your security that you're going to build into zero trust is going to be based off your existing policies and processes. It's just going to add a level of automation. So you're going to really need to think through, what do we want to lock down? What do we want to open? How are we going to do this? What criteria is this going to look through? That's all really going to be based off and derived from your current policies and processes. And if you find that you don't have them, that's where you're going to really need to kind of do a lot of work and really building that up. Data classification. So within the Forrester framework, you're going to see data is smack dab in the middle of it. So the biggest thing that you're really protecting here, no matter what we talk about technology-wise, in the end is data. Because whether they completely lock out your systems, take you offline forever, it's always, I can't access data. I can't send data. Uh-oh, they have all of our data. Well, you need to understand what data you have, where that data lives. So I put data classification in here. That can be a very time-consuming project as well, because it's a really detailed tracking of what you have. But it's one of the base level things of how do you implement a DLP within your environment when you don't know where data is, you don't have data tagged, and you don't know what data you have either. So you really need to go through and really look at your data classification and how you know those things. Because if you don't know what you have, then you don't even know what you need to be protecting. A mature identity and access management program. So one of the biggest things that we'll see when we go out and do assessments is usually the IAM processes are, decent, but there's not a lot of documentation of it. There's not a lot of automation. There's not a lot of review that's being performed. So that's really one of the big things. Obviously with Zero Trust, you're having to authenticate end users. So you really want to go through and make sure that your IAM processes are sound, that your identity stores are relatively clean. And by clean, I mean organized and structured very well. You don't have your entire company in the domain admins group, which I have seen before. So there's a lot of work that needs to go in, and that is very much so one of the foundational things that I would say that you should focus on before attempting the journey. So how do we plot our course? So in the dark, there is discovery, there's possibility, there's freedom in the dark once someone has illuminated it. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And I'll get a little bit salesy on you because we offer help. So there's two things that we're really kind of doing here. So, Trusted Sec really loves to go out and sort of, we're here for the greater good of, kind of expanding everybody's cybersecurity baselines to really make everybody better. So we have two things, and it really depends on your size and your maturity level at your organization. So some are further on their journey than others, and that's fine. And others are looking to get started and just need, where are they going to point their compass? So the first one we offer, it's the Zero Trust Jumpstart Assessment. So this is really smaller organizations or even large organizations to some extent, but they're just really looking for the initial guidance. Where do we sit today? Where do we need to go just to kind of get them going? So, this is something that we offer. It's very good. The other one is we do offer for the more mature organizations or larger organizations, a full Zero Trust maturity assessment. So this is really where we're going to dive in, really do a deep dive into what your current environment, your policies, and your processes are. It's not as technical where it's going to be click this box, click that box. It's more around really the process side and the policy side of everything, and where you're at with deployment of certain things, a higher level view of it to really kind of give you that what's your level of readiness for Zero Trust. So you can go into that. And then one other option on top of that we can do is we can actually build out a roadmap for Zero Trust for you as well. So this will be, where do you need to go? What do we look at for certain timeframes? What needs to come before next? Because that'll really help with you kind of develop budgeting, which is a big thing, as well as a schedule, because you don't want to drop it in your IT department's lap that, hey, we're going to do 45 projects this year, and your finance team doesn't want to see that you want to spend, more than you're supposed to be spending. So
we do have a question that came up,
sure.
and we do have a poll and a question. So why don't we cover that poll first? So the first one is Zero Trust something you feel your organization will be adopting in the future? So a yes, no on that one. And then Jamie, there was a question here. It says, can you clarify the main differences between Zero Trust and high trust? Is the question there. Zero Trust and high trust.
That's when I wish Chris Cameo was on here. But he is more our high trust guy. So that one I am unable to clarify for you.
Okay, no worries.
I
we can
apologize.
maybe
But
all good.
Chris Cameo leads up our compliance side, knows a lot of the high trust stuff that we do. So we could actually have him reach back out to you if you'd like.
Absolutely. Sounds good. We'll do that. Good. Sorry about the little video jitters there on my side. For some reason my video kept locking up. So excellent. Let's get the results of this poll soon here. We'll take a look. Yeah, so we do definitely have 84% of the respondents, pretty high number there, looking to do this. Let's open it up for the Q&A through the chat if there's any additional people, I think. Unless Jamie, did you want to?
No, I think the biggest thing here too is one of the big reasons that we kind of started looking through the zero trust stuff is there's it's very ambiguous and it's been a big buzzword. And well, actually, Shane just put it in there. They're very vague. And my issue being and like I said before, I was a network guy. I was in the technology. I wasn't a policy guru. I read through these books. I read through the white papers. And the thing I kept coming back to is they talked hypothetically all the time about, oh, this magic happens. Yeah. And you've got this orchestrator and it blocks everything. And I'm like, how? Tell me how. And then I see the products that kind of roll through, and I see where they're very valuable at an orchestration level. But it's really kind of how do you bring those together? And I think that's where Trusted Sec will have a lot more to come. I mean, we are very product agnostic, so we're not really looking at the technology side of things like that. But I think zero trust has a lot of value. Obviously, we did this, but the biggest thing that we really wanted to do is really start to kind of show it as value, but also add the value by removing the vagueness out of this for everybody. So if you guys do have any questions or anything like that, you can hit me up, just shoot me an email. You know, I'm always here to kind of chat about it.
Yeah, it looks like one did come in there. Did you see that one come in on the Q&A there?
Which one, from Shane?
No, there's an anonymous one that says, how do you correlate trying to figure out how many pillars there are when the government can't kind of figure that out themselves, and all the vendors agrees that there's the only true solution. I don't know. I think everything is where applicable, right? I mean, there's a
and this goes back to you really have to look at what framework works for you. And one of the reasons we also focused on NIST was that the tenets are very achievable. And to me, they're very identifiable within the technology stacks and processes we all use today. It's trying to bring it down a level to where we can understand, you know, it's encryption, it's dynamic access. It's those things that we need to look at. I agree. There's a lot of with the DoD's releasing, you know, their zero trust information. They still haven't completely figured out some of the CMMC stuff that's out there. That's another great conversation with Chris Cameo to have. He is very in touch with the CMMC side of things. And that's where it can get difficult. That's where you also have to kind of go through and decide what fits. And I think that's where, and not being too salesy, I think that's where the maturity group at Trusted Sec does a great job, is that I always tell that we live in the gray. And that's kind of how IT departments are. Like you have to live in the gray, because it's never going to be check, 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 check. There's always going to be but how does this work? And there's always a way to do things, and they always have to be fit to how it works at your company. Because if it was so easy, and cybersecurity and business was so easy, every business would be doing exactly the same thing, and every IT department would be doing exactly the same thing. And I'll tell you this, every company that we go to and work on is different. And that's what's very intriguing about it.
Yeah. I think going back to some of those definitions you had in the beginning, that, you just assume that you're living in a world where there's adversaries, right? And just you're trying to protect it as if it was exposed and from insider threats. But then if you're going down on that level, then I guess it covers you for the more aggressive levels. So yeah, it's like you said, it's definitely a journey, and people are hopefully moving along this journey to improve their overall security posture.
Yeah, probably the
complex.
easiest definition that I kind of left out, but I'll share, is think of zero trust as least privilege with orchestration living on top. And that's what a lot of the books that I've read basically describe in the first few pages, is that it is least privilege, but it's dynamically controlled with different information and up-to-date information that's running through your environment. It's making intelligent decisions to do least privilege access through your environment.
Yeah. Well, even just that concept of the least privilege access could have ramifications in many organizations, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, just doing least privilege is a lot of legwork to get there as well.
That alone, right? And then having automation around it is definitely complex.
Yes.
Excellent. This has been great.
Anybody else? I don't have the Q&A one up.
Oh, we only had those 2 Q&As. Those you answered.
Anybody have any boat questions?
Yeah, boat questions are.
They're fully welcome.
No.
Cool. No
Excellent.
worries.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you very much. If you would like to get a hold of us, we are available on all of the various different platforms. Not all of them, but the majority of them. So there's our LinkedIn and YouTube and everything else. And again, this video will be available online in a few days or so, or a day or two. Thank you. And thanks, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.